My name is Julie Pearson Little Thunder. Today is September 24th, 2014, and I'm interviewing Nathan Hart for the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program Native Artist Project at the OSU Library. We're at Nathan's home in Oklahoma City. Nathan, you come from a prominent Cheyenne family. Your BS degree is in industrial arts and economics and business, and you've worked in the consulting field. You have a design company. You are perhaps best known though as an artist in wood whose decorative wooden bowls have won numerous prizes and commissions and are handled by several fine art galleries. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Yes, thank you.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Marion, Kansas, but I grew up in Oklahoma, in Clinton, Oklahoma. And what's unique about that story is that my father was, he's a minister. He's retired now,
right.
But he went to a seminary in Elkhart, Indiana. My mother grew up in Kansas, Marion, Kansas. So he was working for the summer before he went on to seminary for my grandfather. And my mom was pregnant, and the doctor told her not to travel with my dad. So he went on up and did the first semester, and I was born in Marion, Kansas, and my mom stayed back with her parents. And later that semester, Dad came back and got us both, so we spent a couple years in Indiana and then moved to Oklahoma. And I've lived in Oklahoma ever since I was 2, my second birthday.
You mentioned your father was a minister. Can you talk a little bit more about him and your mother also?
Yes, so my father, he's a minister of the Koinonia Mennonite Church, Indian Mennonite Church in Clinton, Oklahoma. There were 4 Indian Mennonite churches in western Oklahoma. My mother's from central Kansas, and she is of the Mennonite background. So her family would have came from, immigrated to the United States from what's probably current day Russia. Prussia at the time, but that country no longer exists. So her family came here. It was actually the Mennonite missionaries that settled on the Cheyenne and Arapaho reservation in western Oklahoma and established their churches. And my dad and his 2 brothers were the first of our community and the tribe to go on to college, and they were encouraged to go to college by the missionaries. And so they went to Bethel College, which is where I went to school as well, and that is the Mennonite school, college.
And how about siblings?
I have 2 sisters, one older and one younger, Connie Hart Yellowman and Christina Hart Wolf.
What was your exposure to your grandparents on either side of your family?
On my mother's side, I really only saw them a couple times a year when we traveled up to Kansas to visit. I don't remember either of my grandmothers. Both passed away when I was a very young age. I don't remember really either of those 2. My grandfather, which is on my dad's side, so my dad's father, I remember him the most. He was also very active in the church out in western Oklahoma in the Hammond community. My dad was actually born in Hammond, Oklahoma. So I remember my grandfather on my dad's side.
What was your exposure to the language growing up and Cheyenne culture in general?
Well, the exposure to the language, although we did not speak it every day in the house, learned a lot at church because all the church events, the elders still spoke Cheyenne. So I knew a few words and a few phrases, but we also sang hymns. So a lot of the songs we sang were in Cheyenne in church. And so I guess the exposure that I had was really through all the church activity and the people speaking the language in church.
Your sister's an accomplished bead worker and quill worker. Were there other members of your family who were artistic?
Well, my oldest sister Connie, is very accomplished. My youngest sister, Chris, she did do some bead work as well, and so our family still has some items that she beaded. But her talents were in the performing arts. She was a dancer, so she went to University of Oklahoma to their modern dance school. And so she was a ballerina and a dancer in her younger years. And that really moved her, encouraged her to move into her current field, which she's in physical therapy.
What is your first memory of seeing native art?
Again, I think that's just through our church activities, and part of it is, how do you define, what do you define as native art? I mean, certainly a lot of people think of sculpture and drawings as being art, but a lot of the beadwork, we grew up with it. So a lot of the designs that people had for their families, and then those that just created new designs, definitely are works of art when you look at them and the color combinations that they have. So that's what I remember the earliest was, and I also was taught how to bead. I think that's what our elders did in our church. They taught all the younger people to how to bead. So that was my first exposure, I think, with the arts, is through beadwork.
Right. What is your first memory of making art?
Yeah, that's so the making of the art. When I went through school, I did not take any art classes, and so it's probably just creating things, down by the creek, sculpting, sculpting mud, stacking rocks, doing things with making, three-dimensional objects with twigs was really, I think, the first. I guess actually, if you look back on it now, I didn't know it at the time, but look back on it, that's my first, artistic pieces that I made, or just playing down with the creek with whatever I found in the area.
So you were drawn to 3D.
Definitely drawn to three-dimensional.
Figurative stuff, or?
Some, probably mostly abstract, but certainly tried to do, figurative items as well. I remember at a young age, traveling and going up to Mount Rushmore, and came home and I was digging in the creek bed on the banks trying to make human heads. It didn't work, but it was fun.
So no art classes basically throughout elementary school. Did you have any exposure to art in middle school or high school?
No, I didn't. I didn't take any art classes. I was really drawn towards mathematics. I took every math class that was available to me as an elective in high school, and how that connects with what I do now. When I was moved into college, I entered the industrial arts program. My goal was to be a teacher. I excelled in sports as well, so my goal was to coach somewhere and be a teacher. I liked math, but I also really liked more of the application towards the architecture with that, and so took architectural drawing classes, engineering drawing classes, and came out of there with a major in industrial arts, and also a double major because I also got a major in economics and business administration as well. So I think it was really through that work in industrial arts is where I really focused more on drawings, although they're practical drawings, but drawings, and I took every woodworking class that they had available.
I was wondering.
Because I had a love for wood, and that goes back to growing up at the creek, because the property that we were on, out in the country, had a creek going right through the middle of the property. And a lot of what I did was just playing with the trees and in the trees and dead branches, and so that was my exposure to wood. Really,
chopping wood.
Yeah, chopping wood. Had a love for it.
And you explained the connection and how you ended up at Bethel.
I ended up at Bethel. I guess ultimately because it was a school that my parents had gone to, and my older sister was there. But I wanted to, and I was recruited out of high school athletically to go play with different schools on their football teams. But I chose to go to Bethel because it was a smaller school, and I was a good kicker, and I was being recruited to go kick at different universities, either to walk on or as a scholarship. But I wanted to do more than kick, and I know couldn't do that at a big university, but I knew that at a smaller college, I could just continue playing football for 4 more years as a receiver, and so that's primarily, I think, what drove me to Bethel.
You have a little bit of everything. So, what did you do after college?
Well, immediately after college, I stayed in the area and coached for 2 more years. And at that time, it was a part-time job. It's the other time I took some additional business classes, and then I also worked part-time for a construction company, specialized in building passive solar homes. So I got to stay in the area, and I said, I coached, and that was fun to still be involved in athletics.
Right. And then from there you got into consulting, or?
Well, from there, and the primary reason I stayed for 2 years is because Melanie, we weren't married at the time, but we were seeing each other. She was 2 years behind me in school, so that's why I wanted to be there at Bethel for 2 more years. So after she graduated, we moved to Oklahoma. She started law school. I took some coursework at the University of Oklahoma and got a summer internship with the Oklahoma Indian Business Development Center. And towards the end of that, when I was going to go back into school, graduate school at University of Oklahoma, one of their staff people left. They offered me the position, and I accepted it. And that was my first exposure to working with tribes throughout the state. It was on and individuals starting new businesses. And from then, I've always worked in one capacity or another. I've always worked with the Indian tribes, not just here in Oklahoma, but throughout the country.
Right. So when did you first start getting into wood turning? And you might describe, define it for us. Thanks.
Coming out of college, at a young age, because I'd spent a lot of time attracted to design, and I said I was in drawing classes, architecture drawing, engineering drawing. I mean, you have some exposure to design elements by taking those types of classes. And I was really drawn to wood. So what I wanted to do, my goal was to be a furniture maker and make custom furniture, design it and make it. But at the young age and not having a great income, I couldn't afford all the equipment that you would need to do what I really wanted to do. But I saw people turning on a wood lathe and making wood bowls, and thought, I can do that. So the first piece of equipment I bought was a wood lathe, and I guess I had the goal of adding to that and having a complete cabinet making, furniture making shop. I stuck with wood turning.
Now you're seeing these wooden bowls in school, right? At Bethel,
Right.
Is that right? And what was it that just totally absorbed you about the bowls?
What I remember as a young age as well, we traveled, and a lot of it was through my dad's work. We traveled out to the Southwest. He knew people out there, and his ministry took him that direction as well. A lot of pottery makers from those regions, and native people are givers. And so when someone comes to visit, there's always a gift, usually a gift that they give. And I remember at a young age, people giving me pieces of pottery when we traveled, and I'd keep those and I'd admire them. And later on in life, when I started wood turning, I kept thinking back to the pottery shapes of the Southwest, whether it's a seed pot or some other functional pots. And I felt that this is such a great form to highlight what the characters are in wood. And so if you look at the type of turning that I do, it does resemble pottery. It does resemble the shapes that you see out in the Southwest. And that is why, because at a young age, just my exposure to the people and receiving gifts of their creations is what influenced what you see of the shapes of my pieces today.
What was the first art show that you entered with your...
The very first show that I did was Art in the Park in Clinton, Oklahoma, because that's where my parents are. And I think I was happy when I sold my first piece for $20. Then I did some other local shows, and when I sold my first piece for $100, I was all kinds of happy too. And now I can sell some for more than $100, and I'm happy with that too.
Did you do some of the first Red Earth shows?
I did early on. I did some of the early Red Earth shows. It was a local show. That was really my exposure, I think, to the bigger marketplaces outside of your small weekend local community shows, because that drew artists not just from across the state of Oklahoma, but there were artists that came in from out of state as well, and was part of a bigger festival. Cultural, it was a nice big cultural festival, and so people came in from out of state, and so that was my first exposure to selling art to people outside of Oklahoma.
What was an important prize that you won in a competition early on?
I think one of the, to me, one of the most important ones was a Judge's Choice Award that I got, because...
At Red Earth, or?
It wasn't at Red Earth, it was actually at the Heard Museum. And the way that is structured is that, all the judges, they judge certain categories, but at the end they can cross over to another category and give a special award to another artist, and one of those judges did that. And I thought, well, that's really an honor. I had placed before, and even placed first before in some of in the sculpture division. That's where they put me. But to receive a judge's award was really an honor for me as well.
Yeah, that was one of my questions, because at Native Art shows there weren't a lot of people doing wood turning, and so did you have trouble with categorization? Do you think maybe there were some awards you missed out on, or? Well,
what they, when you enter, of course you enter in what you think early on what you think you should go into, and then you always have to sign that release that says they can put you in another category if it fits. And so I ended up in sculpture, and really my work, I started off in being diverse art forms, but in all these bigger shows they really started pushing my work towards the sculpture categories, and so that's where I reside now, is in sculpture. And depending on the show, some shows have bronze, and some, all of them have stone as a category, and some have stone, metals, and everything else. So wood, glass, and the mixed media are all together.
Do you do a lot of non-native art shows too? How is your work split up?
Not anymore. I just do all native art shows. I do 2 large shows a year. One in the spring, which is the Heard Museum. That's always the first full weekend in March. And Santa Fe Indian Market in August. Usually right there about the 3rd weekend in August. Those are really spread out good. Gives me plenty of time to make my inventory for the next show, because it does take a long time to get these pieces ready. And then I'm represented by galleries. And it just so happens that one gallery is in Santa Fe and the other one's in Phoenix. They sell different times of the year. Phoenix sells great in the winter months, and Santa Fe sells great in the summer months, and so that kind of gives year-round sales in the galleries. Add the 2 shows in, and that keeps me pretty busy.
Typically, how much inventory do you try to take? How many bowls would you try to take to Santa Fe?
I always shoot for in the 20s, but it ranges between 16. I think one year I had like 30-some pieces that I took out. It also depends on the sizes. Obviously, if I'm just going to go with small pieces, I can make more, but if I want to do bigger pieces, it takes a long time. And I think the one year we went out with, I think, just maybe 10 or 12 pieces to Santa Fe. But that was a challenging year, because we had just moved into the house where we're sitting now in July. And we also had 2 girls on the way, and it was a busy year. But that was the lowest inventory that I ever went to a show with.
So you have this great business background, and even do consulting in that area. A lot of artists have trouble with balancing the business end of their work. Have you had any trouble with that? Does it?
Well, I really haven't, and I feel fortunate that I do have, I think, good business sense and understand business. It's really about a lot of it goes back to mathematics and accounting classes that I had. It just really gives me because my business work that I've done has really been in the finance area. So it's all about numbers. It's all about making sure you reach certain targets and ratios and formulas, and that's what, and I enjoy that. But I do love the creative side as well, and I get to do both. I'm also a business owner. I run a business that does embroidery and silk screening on shirts. I have a steady client base, and I get to create the artwork, do some of the graphic design on it, but then I always have to do the rest of it, the production and the orders, and make sure the bids are right and got all the right numbers put together as well. So that's fun.
What role does your wife play in your business? I know she has her own occupation too. But
She does. She has a full-time job, but she definitely checks the inventory periodically and gives me great encouragement to get back out to the shop. She'll sort of follow me out, close the door, and say, "You can't come back in unless you have a piece with you." That's all joking, but she really does, and it's always interesting because I have a process. These pieces are all about a process. You can't just pick them up and go start to finish on them. I work them about 90%. Then I have to let them dry, and they'll warp, they'll move, and then I finish them off. So I have anywhere from 10 to 20 pieces always in the works, and we're sitting there a month before a big art show, and I have nothing done, and she's starting to get nervous. But then all of a sudden, 2 weeks before the art show, there's 20 pieces because it took pick them up, finish them off an hour, and you got one. And so it's all about a process. So, but she's learned not to be so nervous anymore. But she still makes sure that I have the pieces that certain collectors come by to get. Mm-hmm. She makes sure that I have those and new woods for them to look at.
And we'll talk about that process in a little bit. What's an honor maybe that you're particularly proud of? Distinguishing between honors and awards a little bit. You've had some nice commissions, I think, from different organizations.
Yeah, there's different organizations have given me honors. So it was back in the early 90s, and at one of our tribal events, the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes, I think it's the Oklahoma Indian Nations, they honored me as their Indian of the Year. At that time I was doing a lot of work on the state level, and I think they recognized some accomplishments. I think they probably just recognized the difficulty of the job that I had, and that he survived it, so we're going to honor him for that. But being honored by your own people, your own community, I think is it kind of is, to me, something that's very heartwarming.
Right. You've talked about working for the eye with your wooden bowls, not for functionality. I wonder if you can just expand upon that a little bit.
So what my exposure as a youth to just running around the creek and being out in the country and no brothers to play with, so just had my own, made up my own games and my own things to do at the creek. I developed really kind of an eye for nature and an eye for the natural beauty. And I think that's what wood has. And I understand wood and all the different types of wood that there are, and I know the characters of them. And so the pieces that I make I really try to have just a very simple form to them and simple shape, and something that just highlights that natural character, the uniqueness of the wood. And so they're for the eye. I've made functional pieces though. I mean, people want pieces,
wooden
bowls,
I think I read, yeah.
And so I make those as well.
But put some of that eye appeal in there.
Yes.
In your travels, you've mentioned Southwestern pottery as an influence, but have there been other influences, do you think, upon your bowls?
Well, there's been other influences from other artists on my work, and at a young age, there in Clinton, Oklahoma, there was an art show near the creek, on the creek that where I grew up, and there was a basket weaver that came there, Mavis Doring, a Cherokee basket maker, and she sat under a tree, shade tree, and was weaving her baskets. And we watched her. It was a several-day festival, and she had me sit down. A lot of kids sit down by her, and she taught us how to weave. And so I got to know her. And as I grew up, and when she saw me doing my wood, she said, "You need to incorporate the weaving that I taught you into your woodworking." And okay, I'll do that, but I had to think of how to do it. So I started just buying some commercial reed and weaving it into my pieces. And then just sort of let that rest for a while, but I've picked it back up recently and have really gone contemporary with it. So the weaving that she taught me to do, I incorporate that into some pieces I do now. The material that I use is stainless steel. So I have wood and woven stainless steel in some pieces that I do now. And I've only made 4 of them, but they seem to be very popular.
That's great. Yeah,
and that's one of them.
Look at one here. What is the smallest and largest piece you've ever made?
The smallest piece certainly is probably no more than 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches in size. So,
true miniature.
And I could probably go smaller than that. I do enter miniature competitions, and they have a maximum size that it can't be any larger than 3 inches in any dimension. So I do make small pieces. A kind of issue I have with the small pieces is before an art show, one of my daughters usually picks one of those and says, "I'm keeping this for my collection." So I kind of lose a good miniature every year before an art show, but she's got a good collection, I think. The largest piece, there's one that's over 20 inches tall, and made some that are right close to 20 inches diameter. I made a piece that actually was able to weigh it before I put it on the lathe, and it weighed close to 200 pounds. And all finished off the lathe, it's under 90 pounds. So this is removal of a lot of material and a lot of moisture.
So in a way, are the size limitations do they have more to do with weight than
to do with equipment.
Equipment.
My equipment has limitations on it, but still something over 20 inches in either dimension is quite large and heavy. You get any bigger than that, and it is almost too heavy for a person to handle, to get up there on the equipment.
Mm-hmm. What's the most challenging bowl you've made to date, or piece?
There's a type of wood that I really like, but it comes from the root system of a tree. It's got a lot of coloration to it, but it has a lot of natural openings to it, because you can imagine the root starting to spread out. It's not solid wood, but also because it comes from the root, it has a lot of silica, and there's sand, and there's actually rocks that are wedged in between there, so it's really difficult on the tools, given that aspect of it. The wood itself, it's buckeye, comes from California, buckeye burls from the root of the tree, as I said. It's a softer wood, and in the work that I do, softer woods are a little bit more difficult to work with than the harder woods. So it's difficult because it's soft, and then it's a challenge because it has a lot of sand and grit and things that are tough on your tools in there. It takes a long time, but the pieces come out wonderful. They're worth it at the end.
What's the best compliment you've ever received for your work?
Oh, I don't know, I'll give that one some thought, but I've certainly had some interesting comments on my work too.
Or maybe the most interesting comment.
Well, there was I have a kind of funny little story that the second day of an art show, particularly an art show that's busy, and you're just kind of worn out, and you're sitting there. And I remember a lady, I had a lot of redwood pieces on my table, and a lady came by, and she was looking at them, and she was really talking about them, and touching them. And she said, these are beautiful pieces, and well, thank you very much. And she said, and as she was walking off, she said, and I know a redwood. I used to live in a redwood tree. And she was walking off, and I was so tired, I didn't know whether to call her back to hear the rest of that story or just let her go. And so I just kind of stood there and frozen, thinking, wow, now that's a story, but I missed out on it. I just let her go. I was too tired to chase after her to hear the rest of that story. But you get into a lot of unique conversations with people. But I think, something that was fun for me one year, and it happened in Santa Fe. There was a couple from the east, from New York, and they weren't even out there for the show at all. Didn't even know what was going on. They were just coming out there to visit because they wanted to get married there, and they're coming out ahead of time to see Santa Fe for their first time and plan their wedding. It just so happened that the art show was going on, Santa Fe Indian Market, and they had been all over looking at things for 2 days, but they loved my wood, and they decided that's the gift they're going to give each other for their wedding, and they bought a piece. I was happy to be a participant in that big event for them.
That's a neat story. How much of your output is commissions?
My commission work is very low, and some of that is just because what I prefer to do is to make a piece of the wood that I have available, rather than to go out and search for wood that it might be very specific to what they're looking for. So I one of the, I think, unique commission pieces that I have was commissioned by one of the former governors here in the state of Oklahoma, and he wanted a matching set for their lake house, their lake cabin. So it's okay, I'll make you one. And I did that, and when I was done, I thought, never again am I going to try to make two identical pieces. It sounds easy, it's not easy, and he has the only matching set that I've ever done, two matching pieces. And I hope he keeps them on the opposite ends of the mantle, because they really don't match 100% if you set them next to each other.
I was, happy to see that you have kept a few bowls around, and you've explained how your daughters are able to keep your work. But I wondered how you are able to decide. Sometimes artists don't keep things, or how do you decide what you're going to keep for yourself?
I wanted to keep some as my skills progressed over the years. I wanted to be able to have a variety of pieces from the beginning stages through now, and so I will try to keep about one piece a year, just to see what it looks like. Now, some of the pieces that I have here and have up on the shelf, I didn't intend to keep, but as an example, I had one piece sitting out on a table. I cut it so thin and it's translucent, but you can do that to this particular type of wood, but it makes it feather light. And just the slightest breeze came up and blew that off the table, and when I heard it hit, I heard it crack as well. So can't repair it, but I've kept that piece, and it's on the bookshelf. There's several of them up there, and they have the cracks to the back end, so you can't see them. But I really have tried to keep some pieces over the years, just to kind of see how my work has changed, and so the styles have changed slightly, and even the forms have changed.
That's a good idea. What would you say the evolution of the form has been,
Well, I think I've refined it. I think just in looking at it, and I kind of make I make the pieces that I feel look good. Even doesn't mean that everybody agrees with me. I don't know, some people don't, because some people have a conversation with me. They'll say, it would look better if you did this or you did that to it. And I said, yeah, but that takes it out of the style that I do, and I do what kind of what I like best. And it's a way that I feel shows it off the best, and so I stick with the style. I know some other artists that do woodworking, and there are some that are very identifiable to their work, because that they are very consistent, and I do admire that. I think there was a time when I thought, I wish they'd do something different, but as I get older, I thought I really admire someone who just really sticks with a certain style and is very good at it.
I hadn't thought about it, but there is something about wood that people might feel more free to like make suggestions of you should do this or that. They don't do that so much with a painter.
Right, probably not, yes. But well, they do with wood turners. And then of course I get a lot of retired guys that come by that say they have a wood lathe in their garage and they want to talk shop, and so we'll sit there and talk shop for a while with them too.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about your process and techniques. And maybe for starters, what are a couple of your favorite woods to work with and why?
Well, my favorite woods, it's not so much about the species of the wood, but the the character of the wood. And I like working with burls, because the burl is the part of the tree where it's a lot of swirling patterns to it. It's actually caused by a lot of buds that are trying to grow from the inside of the tree out, and on the outside of the tree it just looks like this big knot on the side of the tree, but you pull the bark off and it has a lot of swirling pattern to it, interlocking pattern, and that's the favorite type of wood. So it comes in redwood, comes in maple, you can find it in walnuts and elms, and so a lot of trees will have the burl, and that's a pattern that I like to turn.
Are there woods that you are attracted to but that you don't use because maybe they aren't so abundant?
I have turned some of the more exotic woods that are out on the marketplace and that you buy, but I tend not to do too much of those anymore. I think I experimented with them early on, because I am conscious about the environment, and I don't know, if I don't know the source, that if it's come from a good source or not. I mean, if it's just something that people have gone in and clear cut, or if it's a renewable timber stand that they come from or not. So if I don't know that, then I'm not going to purchase the wood. I do have a lot of unique woods that come from California, and they're redwoods, but I know that the sources of them are that this is trees that have been removed by construction projects that had to come down because they're a hazard to the population in some way, and I don't mind taking those woods and giving them a new life and continued life.
All right. So there are different ways that you source your wood. Some you buy, others you look for yourself.
I do buy some blocks of wood in the retail marketplace. Generally, what I like to do is be in contact with the sawmills throughout the United States, and they'll know what I'm looking for. And I like to have basically tree sections shipped to me, and I cut them up myself.
So a section would be how big?
Well, I just got a shipment in. Again, a log was sent to me. A part of the log was sent to me from California, and it was redwood. I counted the growth rings and consistently got close to 250 rings in there, so it's quite an old tree. It measured over 36 inches in diameter, and they sent me a 20-inch section of it, and it shipped in at over 500 pounds. So it was a heavy block of wood.
Wow.
So that's what I prefer to do, is get the big pieces in. The other source is that I have a good ear for chainsaws, and so as I'm just driving the neighborhood, I hear a chainsaw going. I'm curious enough to drive by and see what's going on.
Okay.
And so I'll ask, and I'll pick up pieces of wood that way as well. During an ice storm that we had in the neighborhood, there were a lot of trees that came down and falling across people's driveways, and I took my chainsaw around and said, I'll make a deal with you. I'll clear your driveway if you can have some of your wood. So I picked up some wood that way as well.
Oh, that's neat. Can you take us through the process of preparing the wood for wood turning?
So I start with, when I get a piece of wood in, whether from whatever source it is, if it comes off of a tree, I take care to seal it up, because the worst thing for wood is to dry too fast because it cracks, and so I seal the log up and
with a sealer.
Yes, and I have piles in the back that are waiting for their turn and piles in the garage that are waiting to be turned. I start with a solid block of wood. It goes on the lathe as one solid piece, and I shape the outside of the piece first, and then when that's done, I go in and hollow out the inside. So if this is hackberry. This actually came from my backyard. I don't know if that
If you
camera
hold it up
picks
just
it
a
up,
little
but
bit
yeah.
more,
So
yeah.
hackberry from my backyard. When I got this log, I sealed the ends of it up, and it trapped all the moisture on the inside. And so you see all these black patterns that are here. That is a very early stage of decay, and that's caused by all the moisture that was trapped in the wood. So I know through experience about how long it takes for hackberry to produce this. I have a lot of hackberry sitting out back. Pecan does the same thing. So that's one way that I've encouraged that the patterns to show up in this wood. So it started as a solid block. It's on a lathe this way. It's of course rotating, and I shape the outside first, that outside profile, and then for the opening, I have different tools that are straight bars and some that are hooked. And that's what allows me to go in through the opening and hollow out the inside. And all my pieces are very uniform in the thickness all the way through. That's just one of the characters of the pieces that I like to produce, is that they're very light, they're thin, but they're very uniform. And I spend probably I'm going to say that 80% of the time that I spend on a piece is all the interior work that you don't see. It's hollowing it out, and it's giving it that final refined thickness all the way through. I can rough shape a piece in just a matter of an hour, but hollowing it out is going to take 10 hours or more till it's finished.
That's really
So that's kind of the rough, the quick version of the process. And then other pieces that I have my designs on, I'll just leave extra material and carve away to get that design.
Mm-hmm. What's one of the best mistakes you ever made while you were wood turning?
Well, I think my in-laws might appreciate one of the mistakes that I made. I was making a competition piece for one of the big shows, and it was one of the bigger pieces that I've made. And I was, I don't know if I should say, I don't know necessarily I was in a hurry, but I certainly wasn't paying as great attention to the detail as I should have. And I pushed my tool too hard through the bottom, and it cut a hole in the bottom of the piece, which meant this is no longer a piece that can be entered in the competition. So I filled the bottom of the hole up, finished it off, gave it as a gift to my in-laws, and they have it in their house with the instructions that not to let anybody pick it up and look at the bottom of it.
That's a great story. Since you seal your pieces, then you're not, like other wood sculptors might be, you're not having to let it cure for a certain amount of time, right? Because
well, I do. I try to. There's a process, and so time-wise, I may pick up a fresh piece. If I start a fresh piece today or this week, I would take it down, turn it about 90%. It'd still be about an inch thick all the way through. That piece is going to be setting for a while and drying, because I want the moisture content to come down, and I want to help slow that and control it so it doesn't dry too fast and crack. So it's probably going to be in my shop for maybe a couple more months drying. Then I can pick it up and finish it off.
right, that's right. And you've got the inside as well as the outside to contend with. Okay. Do you feel like you're finding the shape that the wood already contains, or do you feel like there's something else going on?
Well, a lot of it is that, if you look at my work, you can probably identify maybe several different styles. So it's either a taller vase or something that's even, smaller, more like a seed pot shape. But the shape, again, is really defined by the wood and the character that I want to try to bring out in the wood. And some pieces I kind of know ahead of time and it works, and other pieces they can start out 12 inches diameter, and it's not working, and it's 3 inches in diameter by the time we're down to it and get it finished.
And then you've got the pattern.
You've got the piece, but it's most of the time, my pieces are just only slightly smaller in diameter than what I started with. But sometimes that doesn't work. You just can't get it.
You mentioned in an article, I think, that potters like to use your leftover wood chips.
So I do a lot of things with my wood shavings. I just have them in the back in a compost pile, and I'll take that out to my mom sometimes. But there was a potter I was talking to at an art show, and he said, "I'd like to try some of your wood shavings when I fire my pots." And I said, "Sure." So I bag it up and call him every once in a while and say, "Got a couple bags, come get them." And he does. And so he uses them. So I don't throw anything away. I always try to give it either compost it or do something else with it.
And clay was such an original inspiration. I wonder if you've thought about any clay wood pieces or collaborations.
Talked about that with other artists. Talked about collaborating with them, but we've just never executed that. It's just it's an idea that we kick back and forth at art shows, and I guess when we're bored, have nothing else to do. It hasn't happened yet, but it might.
How do you finish your pieces then?
Because I really like the natural character of the wood, I just use a natural oil. I don't change any coloration at all. Don't change the color of the wood. It's just an oil. So specifically,
tree oil also, or?
It's a tongue oil that I use,
okay.
And it's a commercial product. I don't mix my own, but I only use what I use is actually made to be part of a two-step process, but I don't do the second step. I don't apply a heavy top coat to my pieces. I just like the penetrating oils, and so that it really looks like just a natural look of the wood. And I oil them both inside and out so that they're sealed, so that as they move to a different environment, any intake or release of moisture it's going to be very slow, and it's not going to harm the wood.
Do you title your pieces?
I used to try. I don't anymore. I ran out of names. My creativity only goes so far, and coming up with names is not one of them.
Do you have to title competition pieces?
Occasionally you do, and I just title it by the name of the wood. Redwood number 24. Redwood 12. I'm not very creative on naming. I used to try to be, and really supported by a lot of the people in the neighborhood, so they know I'm an artist. And we used to have open houses before art shows. A lot of our friends have left the neighborhood now, but they would come over, and I'd have a little game where they would, I'd give them wine and say, "Help me pick out what my competition piece is going to be." "Oh yeah, it needs a name. You can help me come up with a name," and that would just be the riot of the party. I don't think I ever used one of their names though. So we sure had fun in that process.
That was a great idea. So in terms of your signature, I read that you use the morning star symbol as your artist remark.
Well, what I do is I incorporate the morning star symbol into my into some of my pieces that I do.
Okay.
And then I guess as a logo for Nathan Hart Studio, I've incorporated that. But I don't actually always sign my pieces with that. I just sign my pieces with my name.
Okay. You want to go ahead and talk about the significance of the morning star symbol a little bit?
Yes, and so in the wood, I guess one thing to think about it is exactly how some people would describe it. They said, "Oh, that's nice. You have a square top on a round bowl. That's very unique." So yes, that does what it is, what it looks like at times, but it has deeper meaning than that. If you look at those particular pieces from the top down, it's a star design, the four-pointed star, which is a morning star design. A lot of the tribes have that, particularly in the plains area, and so our tribe has it as well. And to me, it's really about the renewal. It's kind of the sign of a coming day, and something that's new. that's renewed, it's fresh, it's continuance, and so that's why I incorporate that design into my pieces. Also, that particular design, when you look at it from a lower level, so starting from the top down, you can see the morning star. But if it's a piece and it's like up on the mantle and you're looking at it from the side, it looks like a mountain range. And that's significant to me as well, because our people come from the area that was once near the mountains, near the Rocky Mountains, at a particular point in our history. And so it kind of has dual meaning depending on how you look at that, from what angle. But I'm very happy with someone that just recognizes a square top on a round bowl too.
What's your creative process from the time you kind of get an idea about your bowls?
Again, the creative process is really about examining the piece of wood and looking for what that unique character in that wood is. And sometimes you can identify it right away, and sometimes you can't. I have pieces that I haven't started because I just can't figure out what's going to be the top, what's going to be the bottom, how's it going to be orientated, so they're just still sitting out there on the wood shop floor. So maybe one day I'll pick them up and we'll actually get something out of them. But for the most part, it really is knowing what's going to be in the layers down below the bark, and as you cut into the piece, what that's going to look like. And so that's what I want to bring out, those natural characters, bring that out in the piece.
What is your creative routine? Do you have one in terms of like working mornings or nights or
I'm a
certain
morning
days?
worker, and it's not out of the question for, in the summertime particularly, for me to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and go out and be out in the shop actually producing by 3 o'clock. I don't mind 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock is a great time period for me. I can't stay up late, and there is a certain danger element to what I do. I'm working with power equipment, and I certainly don't want to wear loose clothing or get caught up in the circular motion of the lathe that's going on. So, but I'm a morning person, and so I will get up early mornings. Now, if you were asked one of my daughters, because one of my daughters has a very creative mind, she thinks it's just boring for me to get up and go out to the wood shop. So she has this deal where she believes that I get up and make my coffee, sit on the deck, drink coffee with Bigfoot, and then I go. But he comes to visit me and we chat, and then I go out to the shop and turn. So it's always, did you see Bigfoot today? Did you have coffee with Bigfoot today? Oh, yes, I did.
That's cute. And it's probably cooler out there in the morning.
Oh, it is. It's tough in the wintertime, but my shop is heated, but it's not air conditioned. But that's fine, because I love to open up all the doors and just turn with the natural breeze going through, and hearing the sounds of the day. I'm good for about 6 hours. An 8-hour day on the lathe is really too long. About 6 good hours is what I can put in throughout a day, and then it's tough physically to work any longer than that.
Right. What's a special project that you're excited about right now?
Well, one of it just so happens that right now you and I are talking in the month of October, but coming up in the month of November is an anniversary date for something that happened very tragically to our people, to our tribe, and that's Sand Creek. It's a massacre that happened to our people in the state of Colorado. Well, this particular year, the Denver Art Museum and some other organizations and galleries want to hold an event sort of commemorating that. And so they've asked a number of Cheyenne artists to come in and be a part of a show, a symposium, and a lecture series. And I get to be a part of that. And my work is going to be a part of that. And when I sort of explained in the article that was written, some of the pieces that I do resemble a matriarch figure. If you look at it, it looks like the piece has a neckline and has a blanket or a shawl wrapped around it. And to me, that represents the matriarch figure, an elder, a woman. And I'm going to make those pieces also because it's recognizing older generations. And I know in our tribe we had strong women leaders. We're recognized and known for our warriors and our chieftains, but we had strong women in our tribe too. And so I'm going to make some of those pieces specific for that event that's coming up that, again, recognizes a very tragic event with our tribe, the Sand Creek Massacre. That's a project that's coming up in about a month, less than a month or so, that I'm working on.
What do you consider to have been a kind of pivotal point in your art career, a sort of fork in the road moment?
Well, there was a time where I was just doing this as a hobby, and this for the love of wood, and but made a decision one year to focus more time on it, because two things. One, I really people were admiring my work, but I also wanted to get wood out in these shows that I go to, because I don't see other wood artists that are there, and so I kind of wanted to, I guess, be maybe a pioneer in that area and introduce wood to those marketplaces. And so, there was a year early on when we were doing 9 shows a year, and a lot of travel and producing a lot of inventory. But I guess a pivotal moment came when I decided to maybe scale it back and just focus on doing a couple of big shows, certainly have more inventory there. And I found that it worked. I didn't have to do a large number of shows to sell my work, just concentrate on some of the bigger shows and good pieces, good quality work.
Supplying the galleries. When was that when you decided to really make that shift?
Probably around 2000.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first piece I turned was in 1989 and did a few small shows early on. But, so in my career, the first time I got accepted to one of the big shows, Santa Fe Indian Market was a good year for us. It was an interesting year because I was on the waiting list, and we actually didn't know we were going until 2 weeks before.
Oh my goodness.
we had some pieces in the works, so we went out and set up, and it's been good ever since.
And that was what year?
I don't even remember. We're trying to think of that. It was either 2000 or 2001. One of those 2 years, yeah.
What's been one of the highlights of your career so far?
Well, I don't know if I've really had a highlight, because everything seems to be just pretty steady and pretty consistent in what I do. But I have been asked to do some special pieces and some pieces that are part of some special collections. So there's some pieces in private collections, but there are some pieces in public collections as well. And here in the state of Oklahoma, there were a number of us that were selected to put pieces in the new judicial center that's being built. And to be a part of that, just because it is the quality of the art that is there, it's good to be one of the artists that are there. But also because of the project, what it signifies is that there was actually a public project that really focused on incorporating a lot of art into the building itself. And to pull that off, I think was a major success. And my hat's off to the people who were able to do that.
Right. What's been one of the low points?
We've gone to some shows, the economy, and so when people scale back, they scale back on their purchases of art. And we've had some shows that have just been very tough, didn't sell a thing, had a lot of expenses and didn't sell. So roughing it through the tough years of a tough economy was tough as an artist, but just kept plugging forward. What I did notice is that the collectors still bought, they just scaled their purchases back quite a bit. And there are some people who were very loyal collectors who didn't even come to the shows because we can't buy. We're not even going to be tempted to buy. Just can't do it. We're not going to go to the show. And it wasn't so much about not having a sale to make, but also, not seeing good friends because they couldn't show up.
Right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add or anything we forgot to talk about before we look at your work?
Well, my work at some of the big shows that I go to is the only work of its kind. So in some respect, I kind of stepped out into a new arena with it. And I do encourage people to look at new mediums to work with. I'd like to see more people working in wood out there, and so I hope that I can influence people to work into wood specifically, but also a little bit broader than that is just hope I can have influence on sparking people's creativity. They can look at something and hopefully they'll say, "Oh, I can do that," and then they'll go out and do it.
All right, well, we're going to pause a minute and look at some of these pieces. Okay, Nathan, you want to tell us a little bit about this bowl?
This bowl, it's a eucalyptus, and it has kind of the pattern in it that if it was a maple, people would call it a tiger stripe maple. But it was a unique piece. Really liked it. It belongs now to the collection of Sydney Hart because, as she usually does, she grabs one piece off the table before I go to the art show and says, "This is going to be mine," and so that one's hers. And it happens to be one of her favorites.
How about this bowl?
So this bowl, this wood is actually pecan, but the top of it is the Morningstar design that I incorporate into some of the pieces. And it's one that a lot of people at first glance will like it because it has a square opening on a round bowl, and I think that's kind of a great contrast, but it has deeper meaning than that. The design is actually that of a morning star, which to me represents resiliency, rebirth, the renewal, and so I incorporate that into these pieces because that's actually what I think these pieces are. There's a continuance about them. This could have been destined for a firewood pile, this piece of wood, but I saved it, I turned it, and hopefully someone can give it, long-lasting love in their household. But that's the Morningstar design. And from the side, if it's up high, like on the mantle or something, it really looks like a mountain range. And that also is significant to me as a Cheyenne person because I know that our people at one time lived near the Rocky Mountains, and they moved up and down the plains as part of their life. And so that's what this is. The Morning Star and the mountain range. Part of my culture as a Cheyenne person.
That's beautiful. Okay, how about this hackberry bowl?
This is a piece of hackberry. This is one of the pieces that I've selected to keep in my home. It comes from my backyard. It's actually a tree that we got cut down when the guys are coming through and cutting all the trees or interfering with the high line wires, utility wires, and so they cut it. I saved it. The pattern that you see is called spalting, and it's actually the very early stages of decay. What I did with this log is I sealed the ends up, trapped all the moisture inside, and this was about a year and a half later. I started to turn it, and it has all that coloration that's in the piece. And so that's all natural and unique to this particular piece. Each spalted piece is going to have its own patterns.
Right. And how about these two pieces?
The tall vase is mesquite, and the smaller piece next to it is a eucalyptus piece. The eucalyptus, this particular piece, comes from Australia. The carving around it, it's really meant to resemble a figure of a person that has a blanket draped around them. So that's the design that I cut into that piece. The tall piece is mesquite, and it came from a ranch near the Rio Grande in Texas. There was a lady that came by my booth at one art show, and she said, "Have you ever turned mesquite?" And I says, "I have. I just don't have very much of it. And the next art show, she brought several large stumps for me to have. So this comes from her ranch along the Rio Grande.
I'm just going to reposition the camera real quick because you can really see the little lip that suggests the back of somebody's head or shoulders. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Nathan.
How about this one?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We need to add that one. I forgot about that. Our mixed media piece here. So tell us about this piece.
Yeah, this is one of my mixed media pieces. It's wood and stainless steel. And it was inspired by a lady who taught me to weave baskets at a young age. Her name was Mavis Doreen, Cherokee basket maker. And she taught me how to weave, and she always said, I'd like you to incorporate what I taught you into your wood turning. And for the longest time, I just didn't quite know how to accomplish that. And so it came to me one day to turn the top and the bottom of the piece out of wood, and then to weave in between them. And so I make these boskets. I had to come up with a new name as well. So half bowl, half basket. A bosket.
I like that.
So this is stainless steel.
And the weaving of the stainless steel, that can't have been easy.
You go through several gloves in weaving this.
Right.
Weaving the wire.
All right. Well, thank you very much for what you've shared today.